we had taken basically all of our savings, retirement, and bought the business, bought the brokerage, and still felt like God was calling us to do Godspeed, to do the ministry. So we start looking for ground in this day and age with no money.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Ryan Snaadt. It rhymes with odd, and you're listening and watching the Rhymes with Odd podcast. Today, we are jumping back in the booth with another amazing guest. We have Lorenzen in the house. Al, welcome in.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming in. Excited to talk about kind of your journey and get connected. I know you were a referral from Jeff Lucas, so shout out to Jeff for connecting us.
We've gotten to know Jeff. My wife pro-rodeoed for 25 years, and she got to know Jeff that way. And I have two sons now that rodeo, and we spent some time with Jeff down when he was still living in Tennessee, and just a great guy and committed to the sport of rodeo and loves the state of Iowa.
Sure. And you're back in Iowa too. That's kind of ironic. You guys both kind of relocated back.
Yeah, I joke around with people all the time. You don't come to Iowa unless it's for a woman or witness protection, or you're born here. And I think I've touched all three. Enjoyed. I lived in Europe for several years. Lived in Florida for several years, and then moved back to Iowa and been back here longer than I probably want to admit.
Very cool. Well, welcome back. It's always fun to see people that go. And I always say if someone grew up here, go elsewhere for a little bit and just see what else is out there. And then if you choose to live here, make it a choice, not like I was afraid to cross the boundary line.
Living in Florida was funny. You'd ask people, why'd you move here? Well, I moved here for the weather. And it's a great place to visit and not bad. There's no sense of community. There's no sense of the things that we as Iowans, I think, take for granted. The fact that a lot of us that live in or close to an area that we grew up, you have that community. You have that neighborliness and I don't necessarily buy into the Iowa nice thing. I call it Iowa passive aggressive. Somebody might say the nice thing, but there's still that neighborly commitment. People genuinely look out for each other.
That's perfect. No, that's great. And we'll talk kind of about your path. It sounds like there's been a crazy life story here. But for the people that don't know who you are and what you do, if you have like a minute or two to explain, maybe a house party or something, how do you usually introduce yourself? Like, who are you and what do you do?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure I can answer it. I only have one story. Born and raised in Iowa, I'm 6'9", and I won't tell you how much I weigh now. And played basketball at the University of Iowa. Went over and played overseas for almost 7 years, I think it was. Retired to Florida. Have spent an interesting career in banking and business and nonprofit management. Fast forward to today, we own a brokerage that helps small businesses buy and sell other small businesses in Iowa. So if you're a small business owner and looking to exit, not sure how, maybe you don't have a kid that wants to take over or a key employee that's in a position to do that, we come alongside those small business owners and help them figure out what an exit strategy looks like and what it means to develop a succession plan. And then at the end of the day, help them execute that plan. But our passion for my wife and I is really helping kids and veterans and first responders. And we do that through a kind of unique way. We have a ministry that we do faith-based equine therapy. So we have a 22-acre ranch just north of Waukee. It's a Dallas Center address, but we're only about a mile and a half from Waukee. And we don't charge anybody to come there. We have 16 horses, and we do sessions basically 5 days a week of helping people kind of cope, deal with their past, unpack some things. And so that's what our passion is. And the brokerage, the business side of it just kind of helps us fund that because horses are expensive. Anybody that has them knows. And in the meantime, we're parents, we're active in our community. We don't let too much grass grow under our feet.
Sure. No, I love that. I think we'll dig into all those aspects, but it's super cool to see, like you said, having this passion and knowing that to actually facilitate this, it takes money. So we have to have a successful business to
somehow we got to pay for it. Yeah.
Exactly. Fuel the passion, which is great. I love hearing it. Kind of a good place to kind of start would probably be the beginning. So if you can kind of tell me a little bit about your childhood, where'd you grow up and what was your childhood like?
I split time growing up between Cedar Rapids over in the eastern part of Iowa and Dallas, Texas. And my dad was with what started out as College Radio, then became Rockwell International, and that necessitated the move to Texas and then the move back. So spent most of elementary school in Texas, most of junior high and high school in Iowa. Grew up in a home that wasn't without challenges. There was abuse in the home. My mom was an alcoholic, and so a lot of people that are living in this world today have dealt with similar things, and all of us respond to it differently. I've got siblings that have responded dramatically differently, and we're all kind of on that healing continuum if we're honest about it, if we're self-aware about it, and so for me, for years, I was a hyperachiever. I was driven to, I was the first McDonald's All-American from the state of Iowa, and basketball was everything to me, and that was how I was going to overcome and leave all that behind. And then it's morphed into just how can we make a difference in people's lives, and the difference that we want to make is an eternal one. Now we have a pretty interesting way of doing that, using horses and trying to lead people to faith that way. But the fact is, it all goes back to, hey, I wish I'd had something like this when I was a kid, and just to be able to come alongside kids, whether they're dealing with sexual abuse, physical abuse, or just have trouble coping, have anxiety, depression, maybe they don't fit in at school, any of those kinds of things. Being able to be a resource where there's no charge for families to take advantage of what we do, that really, that's ultimately what gets us out of bed in the morning.
No, I love that. Have there been, and this is a question I think would be interesting for your perspective, has there been something clear to you that is making some of these disorders, kind of the barriers in life, kind of come out? Because I feel like in the last few years, maybe it's just people shoving it under the rug their whole life, but it's like, I feel like now more than ever, there's more talk about and more visibility of like mental health issues and mental disease, and like people with trauma coming out about it. What's been your experience just kind of exposing that from the public?
Well, I have what in today's world would be considered kind of a radical perspective on that. I think it's a complex issue. So anybody that thinks they can explain it away with a soundbite one way or the other is doing it a disservice. So there's no question we have more mental health challenges than we've ever had before. As a person of faith, I also would tell you that there's evil in this world. And so you can't just dismiss it all out of hand as mental health. Some of it is absolutely spiritual. And you can't just discount that. So there's a combination of mental health. There's a combination of spiritual warfare going on in our culture today. The other thing, the other thing that you see is becoming a victim has become a kind of currency in our culture. And certainly there are marginalized groups and groups that have been oppressed or feel like they've been oppressed, and that's not okay. And that's not right on any standard. But what's happened is the pendulum has swung so far the other way that it's almost like a competition to see who can be the biggest victim. And we see parents who maybe didn't get some of the parenting that the way they would have overcompensated. And so you've got kids running around that, you look at some of the numbers today and you say, if you've got a parent going to a job interview with their college graduate, we might be going a little too far that way. Mm-hmm. If we don't allow our kids to experience adversity, if we don't allow our kids to say, to fail, and to deal with the consequences of that failure, we're doing a disservice to them as parents. So when I say it's a complex issue, I really mean that. I do believe there's spiritual warfare. I do believe there's genuine mental health issues that can be brought on by the speed of our world, the accessibility of information in our world today, where the average person is constantly comparing themselves to everybody else. And, when social media, all you see is the best and the brightest. And, hey, look what we did. And look at this awesome vacation. And look at little Tommy just hit 3 home runs in his game. And you're sitting there thinking, well, my kid didn't hit 3 home runs. So are we less than? That comparison is the thief of joy adage, really. So I do think that all that compounds into mental health. And then I think as parents, I've got an older daughter who's 30, lives in Florida. She played basketball at the University of Florida. She had great success, more athletic, smarter, and more talented than her dad ever was. And you look at her experience in youth sports. Now I have a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old right now, and you look at their experience, and it always struck me, Ryan, as going to a youth basketball tournament, and you got kids still, I see them third, fourth graders whose parents are still tying their shoes for them. I see third, fourth graders, or even in high school. I was at a high school game, a summer league game for my 17-year-old this last week, and you still have parents running to get water to fill their kids' water bottles while the game's going on. And on one hand, parents are, well, we just love our kids, and we want to. Well, at some point, you've got to let your kids learn to do for themselves. And we can't, and that's one of the beautiful things about my sons and my wife's sons rodeoing. You can't be dependent on mom and dad to rodeo. You've got to be independent. You've got to, it's a tough, demanding sport, and you can't have mom and dad do everything for you. So it's been really interesting. This conversation is I've kind of taken you down a rabbit hole, haven't I?
This is great, though. No, keep going, please.
At the end of the day, there's some core philosophies that I follow as a parent, and the first is your parenting isn't evaluated by what you do for your kids. It's evaluated by what you teach your kids to do for themselves. And the other thing I saw on social media the other day that just hit me really between the eyes. We've got a generation of parents that are increasing their self-esteem by stealing their children's. And nobody does that on purpose. Nobody. But at the same time, if you're not allowing your kid to figure out they can overcome failure, allowing their kids to figure out, life ain't fair. That teacher, I don't think it was fair the way that teacher graded me. Well, that may be true, but someday you're going to have a boss that you don't think is fair. And so how we walk through those challenges in life with our kids, that means everything, especially when they're in their formative years. So, when you look at our world today, absolutely some of what's going on is spiritual, and the modern Christian church doesn't believe in it. We don't talk about the devil. We don't talk about the demonic. If you believe in the Bible, if you're a Bible-believing Christian, and that's what we aspire to be, you can't discount that. You have to acknowledge that that's going on in our culture today. Then you have the mental health stuff that's occurring because of the way the world is structured today and the access to information and all those things. And then, frankly, you got parents that just need to let their kids be kids and let their kids fail.
Mm-hmm. No, so many great points. I think I can definitely speak to some of the things that we've seen, like you mentioned. Yeah,
you've got young kids, right?
Yeah, and this is really hits home with me because I have a 3-year-old and then a 1.5-year-old daughter. I have a 3-year-old son and then a 1.5-year-old daughter. And my wife and I are very attuned to how the world is different now, because the way our parents raised us is different than their parents raised us. And I mean, even things like, we'll be in a big group setting with family, and my wife's parents will be there, and then her like her grandparents are there, and they're all surprised that I help out with the kids. They're like, oh, we never did that. The husbands never did that. And I'm like, why wouldn't I help? Just not how it was back then. There's generational things that happen.
Yep.
But even to your point about the accountability and shielding your kids, we've had parents reach out to us about hey, are you guys hiring? My son or my daughter would love to work for you. I'm like, what? You're reaching out on behalf of your son or daughter? How old are they?
Yeah,
20.
Red flag.
I'm like,
red flag.
Are you serious? Why can't they call me? Oh, I don't know, I just know they needed a job. I'm like, oh my God. You don't have.
Right.
They're afraid they're going to get told no, and they have send their parents to go do it. Or worse, they have zero interest in this, and their parents are trying to shoo them out of the house, so they're going and trying to find a job.
Well, and all parents care about their kids, right? Nobody's saying, hey, I want to kneecap my kids before they can get started. But that's the unintended consequence. A lot of times, you call them helicopter parents, whatever it is. And the flip side of that is, Ryan, that we see in ministry is you see a lot of marriages suffer when the kids were the center of everyone's attention. The model is clear. There's God, then the marriage, then the kids. If you're a faithful person, if you're a Bible-believing Christian, and I understand not everybody watching this will be, but what that does is it establishes a clear order and hierarchy. And if your kids are the first priority, and the wife is devoted to the kids and the husband's devoted to the kids before they're devoted to their marriage and each other, what happens when those kids leave? What happens when those kids are starting families of their own and all of a sudden mom and dad want to control that family too? And those are those natural struggles and seasons of life that I think our modern culture tends to discount. And when you have that over-involved parent, it causes challenges for many, many years.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we see this a lot. And my wife and I, we've been together for 14 years since high school, and we're really like, when we started a family, we were like, how are we going to do this? Because there's so many ways to do it. And I think it's interesting because a lot of times my wife, her first reaction is to like, if someone's hurt or something's about to happen, like run to stop it.
Right.
And I'm one of those like sit back and let it play out type of things because I'm like, the growth that a child can have just when they have the independence and the empowerment to like, well, how would you solve it or go do this? Even my 3-year-old, like there's a point where I let him get dressed every morning. He dresses himself. And my wife was like, he can do that? I'm like, you just got to let him try. Like,
right.
Why don't you try? I'm like, oh, okay. And like, he'll script a couple times and fix him here and there. Maybe his shirt's on backwards or something. I'm like, figure it out.
Well, with 2 teenagers, and they're with their mom half the time and they're with me half the time. And I'm not doing your laundry for you. I'll help you because but you need to make sure you need to know how to do your laundry. You need to know if you want to cook yourself some eggs, you need to know how to do that, and I'm happy to do it. And I love serving them. And I do breakfast pancakes on the weekends and that kind of stuff. I still value that, but at the same time, they've got to learn to be independent. They've got to learn to not be, and knock on wood, so far so good. It's, my daughter, Haley, who is, she's probably more successful as a 30-year-old than I'll ever be. But she's got her priorities. She just got married, and she's doing incredibly well. She's a strong, independent woman. Praise God for that. And then you got my two sons that are moving in that direction. And they're all different. They're all unique. But there isn't any of them that are going to be afraid to go out into the world and make their way.
No, I love that. And I think that's a testament to a really good parent is how well they can survive without you. It's like you got 18 years to prepare them, and then failure to launch is a serious thing, and a lot of people it's the parents doing, or the kids don't feel empowered to go and chase things or fail or whatever. But I always tell my wife, and I always talk about it, and it's interesting seeing kind of how it plays out.
Well, and you guys are solving the riddle already. The fact that you guys have sat down and been proactive and said, okay, what do we want this to look like? And that level of intentionality, we deal with business owners, and what's your business plan, right? And any consultant, one of the first things they're going to do is, do you have a business? Well, how many of us have a plan for our family? Mm-hmm. Which is more important? In terms of priority. So that level of intentionality is so important in the world today, and talking through, okay, what do we want this to look like? It's not like you have to have a 30-page document but you have to at least sit down as a husband and wife and say, okay, we're going to have kids. What do we want this to look like? How are we going to raise them? What does it look like? Are we putting them in public school? Are we putting them in private school? Are we homeschooling? Are we all those things? And certainly your family of origins are going to impact your decisions and everything you're bringing to the table. But because your family of origin did it one way doesn't mean that you're locked into doing it that same way. And, that's the one of the beautiful things about my daughter getting married this last year is walking through, what healthy boundaries look like. And like, you're not, when at the wedding you had people, oh, we're so glad that she's joining our family or he's joining our family.
They're making their own family.
Exactly. That sounds trivial in a way, but it's not. You're grateful for your roots and your family of origin, and they're always part of your extended family. But guess what? We're going to build our own family. We're going to develop our own traditions and our own things that are important to us. And you do want to honor your parents, and you do want to honor your family of origin, but they don't get to tell you how to run your family. And so it's been really cool to walk through that. I just was having a phone conversation with my daughter last night. She lives just outside of Orlando, Florida. And, she said, wow, Dad, that's really wise. I said, well, I'm almost 60 years old. You'd like to think that at some point we've picked a few things up. And Kelly, my wife and I have a kind of the foundation of how we interact with community and family comes down to, we just say we want to build a bigger table. And what does that mean? That means we want to be kind of a gathering point. We want to be people that bring people together, starting with our family. We have a blended family, so I have stepsons. Kelly obviously has stepsons, and the early years of our relationship, that was a challenge because her kids didn't want anything to do with me, and she didn't want to be around young kids, and I had a couple of those, and so we've had to navigate all that. And where we've landed is, it's a beautiful thing when everybody's together around that table. And as a dad, and now a grandfather, and as a guy who has been a leader most of his life, if I'm in there correcting, fixing, pointing out everybody's faults, and you're not going to build a bigger. Nobody's going to be around your table. You're going to end up sitting at a table wondering where everybody is. And so what we're able to do is just let's create the conditions that people want to be a part of. Let's create an environment that people want to be. We're not going to sacrifice who we are, our values, or our beliefs, but at the same time, the most important thing is let's get people around the table, and then we can talk about all the other stuff. But let's just love them. Let's love them unconditionally. Let's create opportunity for family and community to come together, and then we'll see where it goes.
No, I love that. And I'm sure we'll circle back to this, but I think it'd be interesting to hear about your, you mentioned the traveling journey. So you mentioned you went to college for basketball. Take me to that point, and then like post-grad, like what kind of happened after that?
Well, I in the 80s, which you probably weren't even born in the 80s, were you? Yep.
94. So I'm 30. So.
Yep, 84 to 88, played at the University of Iowa. We had tremendous success, went to an Elite Eight, a couple Sweet 16s. And then my senior year at Iowa, I had back surgery, so missed my senior year and, wasn't expected to ever play again. Doctor said, with luck after the surgery, you'll be able to lead a relatively normal life. But I had some complications that made it not very straightforward. And so was able to come back and play, was super excited to, again, just get that second chance to play basketball, something I love doing. Went and played in Europe for almost 7 seasons. And then on my terms, was playing in France my last year, was MVP of the league, and retired. And moved to Central Florida and got into a career path at that point. So, for me, basketball wasn't necessarily a happy time. I kind of mentioned, achievement for me was a way to validate what I didn't get from my family of origin, and that validation and the foundation that you'd love your children to have, I really didn't have. So I tried to achieve that through basketball. And when I got to the university, it wasn't a real joyful time like you'd think it was. It was, as I look back now, it was relatively dark time, a lot of partying, a lot of chasing girls and doing all the things that you think these athletes do. And the roots of all that were some really unhealthy things. And sitting here today, I can unpack that and deal with it and start to, and years ago, hopefully started the healing process. And obviously our faith enters into that and how we manage that, how we heal from it. But so what should have been an incredibly joyful, exciting time really wasn't. And now as I move along and get older and we take care of it, we're ranchers. People say, oh, you're a cowboy. Well, I got all the gear, but no, I'm not a cowboy. I'm a rancher. My job is to make sure we have the facility to accommodate the therapy programs that we need, which involves, we've got an outdoor arena, we've got an indoor arena, we've got a stall barn, we've got a barn dominium that has office space and meeting space and shop space. It's a lot of work taking care of 22 acres and 16 horses, and that's, so that's my job. I never dreamed at 60 years of age I'd be doing that. I tell people when this program started at Wildwood Hills Ranch as an after-school program as a complement to the summer camp program that Wildwood has, and then when we left, the old cowboy that managed the horses down there said, hey, I don't want these retired rodeo horses that you have for this program. They require maintenance and, vets and farriers. And so one thing led to another, and we started our own 501c3 and said, let's do this. And it's been quite a journey to get to a place now where we have this beautiful state-of-the-art facility just a mile outside of really suburban Des Moines. And, we look back and reflect on that, Ryan. There's no way we could have done this on our own. When we had taken basically all of our savings, retirement, and bought the brokerage, and still felt like God was calling us to do Godspeed, to do the ministry. So we start looking for ground in this day and age with no money. And here we are 5 years later with this beautiful state-of-the-art facility, and we're serving hundreds of kids a year. Beginning our process now of serving veterans and first responders, offering free horse therapy. And you reflect back on that, and you're like, wow, we've had the community's been incredible and have rallied around what we do. It's a testament, I think, to the unique gifts and skills. Kelly's incredible with people and with horses, and she's just a magnet. People meet my wife, and the first thing they do is want to share their life story with her. I'm not that warm and fuzzy, but I've got a lifetime of experience in fundraising, in event management, in nonprofit management, and so all the hard skills on the backside. So my job is to create the facilities and the environment where Kelly and our session leaders that work with the kids, they're freed up to just do that, and they don't have to worry about the rest of it. And the beautiful thing about all this is my two sons, you talk about trying to raise independent, strong, healthy young men. They've been shoulder to shoulder with me doing all the projects, doing a lot of the things. We obviously subcontracted a lot of it, but we've been the general contractors on all this construction. And so to be able to do that with them and teach them and have them grow along with it. And now, when they'll go, my 17-year-old, my 13-year-old, they'll load up 3 or 4 horses and go to a rodeo 3 or 4 hours away, and I'm sleeping. I'm sitting. I don't need to be there. The first few times, you're checking and let's keep an eye on things, but they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing as well as I do. So it's been quite an adventure all the way around.
That's awesome. What is probably like the biggest lesson working with horses has taught you about life?
It's unpredictable. And that, we deal with primarily, as I said, retired rodeo horses, which are in the horse world as bomb-proof as you can get. They've seen the loud noises, experienced the crowds, been hauled all over the place, but they're still horses. They're still 1,100 pound animals, and they're prey animals. So they're, if something spooks them, you better pay attention, and you learn. And one of the beautiful teaching things about horses, again, don't get me confused with being a horse person, but I've learned so much just watching Kelly, watching my sons, and watching what's going on at Victory Ranch that if you're paying, and humans are the same way, we all have tells. If a horse's ears go back, something's not right. If the horse is pinning its ears, it's upset, it's angry. You can look at a horse's body language. They don't bluff. Okay, a horse, if they're going to cut in two, if they're going to buck, if they're going to do, they're going to give you signals that that's going to happen. So, and that's part of what you're doing is the horse is kind of a mirror, a window into the energy that we're bringing into that horse's presence. Because the horse's first thing when someone walks up to a horse, the first thing the horse is this safe? Are they going to hurt me? Are they, are they okay? And so if you're angry and you're walking up to a horse, they sense that, they know that, and they're going to react accordingly. If you're bringing fear into that equation, the horse knows that too. And so all those things, you talk about as we deal with kids that, again, have learned not to trust people for very good reasons. And so part of helping teach them to trust is learning to trust that horse and learning to teach them to read some of those signals. It's a really beautiful thing to watch. It can also be a painful thing to watch when we miss those signals, just like life with humans. If you lack that self-awareness, if you lack that ability to look at what's going on around you, there's going to be consequences to that.
Absolutely. Do you guys do any like private trail rides or other things that could generate revenue, or is it solely just the therapy types of sessions?
No, it's funny. We do fundraisers. So we have we have our indoor riding arena is 80 by 160, and we in the fall we have somewhere between 150 and 200 people in there for a fundraiser, and we have dinner and kind of tell the story, celebrate the year, have an auction, and frankly ask people for their support. And then we do a golf outing the Hearts for the Herd is actually in the spring now, my mistake, and the golf outing is in the fall. We just switched those two this year. But so we do those two events to help. The idea would be to fund kind of the operations. Horses are expensive. I just got an $800 bill for grain, that you don't think about. We spend about $1,500 a month just on farrier, which for those of you that don't know anything about, that's pedicures for your horses, basically. So the numbers add up in a hurry. But we've had a lot of volunteers. Oh, well, we should do birthday parties. We should host this. We should do that. And at the end of the day, we're protective of the animals, number one, and what we're doing with them, how we use them, the amount of time we're using them. A lot of them are older horses, so we're very, very particular, especially Kelly, my wife, very particular about how we care for them. And we have a lot of horses donated to us because people that know horses know that our horses are spoiled rotten, and it's a pretty sweet retirement gig for a lot of retired horses. So we just, to move the needle for us is not, hosting a birthday party for, I hope this doesn't sound ungrateful, but for $250 doesn't move the needle. Mm-hmm. And so at some point you have to say, for the amount of time we have to put into it, for the wear and tear on the horses and all those things, we just don't do that. We will in the past, and we will again in the future, do some corporate things. It's one thing if you want to bring a dozen people out for team building as a corporation, and it's a $1,500 or $2,000, and we do some coaching, some team building, and there's some incredible lessons that can be learned in group settings through working with the horses. That type of stuff does move the needle, and that produces fruit. So we do those kinds of things, but our model is kind of say, nobody pays to do this, and we don't pay anybody. So all of our session leaders are volunteers. Kelly and I, 100% of our time is volunteered. My CPA is like, "Are you sure you want to keep doing this? Because this is just a big hole you're throwing money into." And well, it's a legacy for us. It's we hope that the ranch is there and that Godspeed Equine is helping people long after Kelly and I are out of the equation. And so that's really what we're doing and how we're building it. But so because of we've limited our overhead, there isn't salaries and other things in there. We have the cost of the building, the land, and we have what it costs to take care of the horses. Mm-hmm. And our goal is to get the two events, the Hearts for the Herd in the spring and our Gimmies for Geldings golf outing in the fall, to have those things eventually grow to where they will cover the majority of our operational expenses. And Kelly and I are committed to covering the facility part. So how do we, we're committed to covering the expense that, we still have a small mortgage on the property, and so that comes due every month, and the banker seems to want his check every month. So we do that. We're hopeful to get the operations covered, and our goal is that by the time Kelly and I are out of the equation, the mortgage is paid off, and we've got these events to where they will cover the operational expenses on an annual basis.
I love hearing that, and just having kind of a plan for it is super helpful. So you're, like you said, not throwing money into the abyss and hoping that it doesn't go anywhere.
Well, we hear from people all the time, "Hey, we love horses. We want to help kids. And can you show us how to do that?" Well, no, we really can't. We can talk through what the big rocks are in these things, but at the end of the day, it's got to be sustainable, or why do it, right? Mm-hmm. And so every step of the way, and my background is, CEO of Wildwood Hills Ranch, and the business side of things, the banking side of things. I know enough to understand the financial piece, and if you can't sustain what you're doing, there's no point in really trying to do it.
Sure. No, totally. As we're kind of talking about this nonprofit you're doing now, I'd love to hear a little bit about your M&A business that you guys have gotten into. Talk me through kind of the steps that you got to the point where you acquired this business or began this business.
Well, it's funny. I tell people part of my story is I've never applied for a job, and I've had a lot of them. And
did you bring your mom with you if you did,
yes.
or would you if you did?
And so as time passed, opportunities presented themselves, and some in some non-traditional ways. And when I made the decision to leave Wildwood Hills Ranch, wasn't sure what was next, and I bought a little hobby farm in Bevington and was rehabbing that to flip, and that's actually where we started Godspeed the nonprofit. We had a barn and pasture there, and so we moved the horses that Wildwood donated to us to get started, and Kelly started working with kids, and I was rehabbing the farmhouse. And during that time, a friend, I had run for the State House in 2008 up here in the Johnston area. And one of the guys in the community that supported me reached out and he says, "Hey, I saw you left Wildwood. What are you going to do now?" And I said, I don't know. Well, Mike Scoville was his name. Mike owned the Business Brokers Incorporated, and he had been a corporate guy for many, many years, and for the last decade had matriculated into the brokerage side, into helping owners buy and sell. And I remember saying to Kelly, I'm like, I don't see myself being a 1099 guy. I don't really want to ride a cubicle either. But I like Mike, I respect Mike, so I'm going to go have a cup of coffee with him. And lo and behold, when we sat down to talk, he said, "Hey, I'm 70 years old. I'm looking to get out, and I think you're somebody that might be somebody that could do this." And the thought process for me was, well, Mike's a process guy. He's got a spreadsheet for everything. He's got a CRM with 30,000 names in it. He's got 5 or 6 guys that are functioning agents. There's existing cash flow, and I've been a business development guy, a community focused guy for most of my professional career, and have a decent network here in the state of Iowa. Those two things might work, and so move forward and acquisitions, whether it's small like that one or it could be a $20 million acquisition, they take time and there's complexity to them. And it took us 5 or 6 months to negotiate and work out an asset purchase agreement. And the funny thing is, the reason I bought it was all the processes that I thought I valued that he had in place. I changed them all in the first year.
Nice. So
we switched CRMs. We switched virtually the majority of the process, new website, new, all the things. So hired a bunch of new agents and I didn't intend to do this. I studied business at the University of Iowa and got my undergraduate degree from William Penn in business. So I have a background, and I've been in banking, and I've read a profit and loss statement. I halfway know what a balance sheet is supposed to look like, but never intended to do this. And when I say I've never applied for a job, but here I am in a position where, with the brokerage, it's, knock on wood, it's been successful enough that's allowed us to get Godspeed functional and up and running, and it also gives us the flexibility to do certain things. So we couldn't have done Godspeed and started to come alongside so many kids and watch God impact so many lives through those horses if we hadn't had the brokerage. So when you get to be almost 60 and you start reflecting back and you start looking at some of those, what we call kairos moments, those significant moments in life that, you either go one way or the other. It's interesting to see how those processes and those decisions have put you where you are today. I wouldn't change anything. We're joking around. One of the things that we do as a fundraiser every year for Godspeed is we run fireworks stands. And we, a lot of nonprofits do that here locally. And, you get a percentage of the profits which help fund what we do. And it's hard. It's, when it's 97 degrees and a heat index of 138, whatever it was the other day, and you're sitting in a tent, sweating in the Valley West parking lot, you're saying, why are we doing this? Why, can't we just find something that's a little more comfortable, a little easier? And we remind ourselves we didn't sign up for comfort or ease. I mean, at 55 years of age, I'd never been in a skid loader, and I bought one so we could start working at the ranch. And there's been thousands of hours in the skid loader since then. That wasn't easy or comfortable, but here we are. We believe it's what we're called to do, and so you do it. But yeah, it's been, I keep saying it's been an adventure, and Kelly and I, we say that all the time. Great example. Last fall, we were looking for a new horse trailer. And, in the span of 6 hours, not only did we find a horse trailer, but we figured out we had to drive 14 hours into Louisiana to buy it and bring it home. And so, I'm like, my life is a country song. Here I am. Yesterday, I was sitting in Iowa relaxing, and now I'm in a 1-ton truck driving 14 hours to Louisiana to get a horse trailer. We just say it's another adventure, and that's kind of the approach we take. She and I love. We say we know how to drive and we love adventures, so let's go.
Sure, no, I love it. Just kind of a mixture. Every day is a little different. That's always nice.
It's never dull.
That's awesome. For the business side, as you've kind of grown this M&A business into like what you wanted it to be. I'm sure you guys deal with a lot of different businesses that are being acquired and things like that. What do you feel like are some of the signs that someone is like ready to start looking at a succession plan or kind of that next step? Because I feel like a lot of businesses go unsold. They just close down when the owner retires or they're just done with it.
And you see that especially in rural Iowa. I work with the small business development centers throughout Iowa, and we do succession planning seminars and talk. The first and foremost, Ryan, what we tell everybody is have a plan. Okay. And when you ask a lot of small business owners, what's your succession plan? Well, we got an auctioneer next town over, and I built up a fair amount of assets. We'll just auction them off. And obviously that bothers me on a lot of levels. A, you're going to lose those jobs in that community. B, you're going to take 30 or 40 cents on the dollar in most cases when you're auctioning off equipment and that stuff. And not only that, it takes that owner, that seller, out of a position of being able to kind of dictate what happens. And so, the reality in today's world, though, is, it used to be, well, you'd hand it down to your son or daughter. And now you've got, if you're in Des Moines, that's one thing. Maybe your son or daughter don't mind living in Des Moines. If you're in a town of 1,200 in Northwest Iowa, your son or daughter may, no, I don't want to stay in this town the rest of my life. Or they've seen how hard and the hours and everything that mom or dad had to put in to build the business, and they don't want to sign up for that. And you can't blame them for that. So you have that weird, as everybody that's an Iowan, has concern over, hey, what's happening to rural Iowa, and it's shrinking and all these towns are going away and all these things. Well, we kind of have a small role to play. Not that we don't work in the metropolitan areas. We've got some listings in Des Moines right now that are really great listings. But where we really get excited is how do we come alongside that rural business owner that hasn't thought about that? And we have those same people. Hey, I'm 75. Why do I need to think about slowing down? And so we try to say, first and foremost, have a plan. Be thinking about the future. And do you have a key employee that might be able to take over? Do you have a child, a son or daughter? If you don't, then that's where we come in. And there's kind of this myth out there. There's a book out there called The E-Myth, and that is that every small business owner is an entrepreneur. Well, in Iowa, what you see in a lot of cases is these small business owners are technicians. They saw a need. There was something that they didn't have on the farm that they wanted, or something in the area that they said, hey, let me just create something to solve this problem. And then you fast forward a few years and some of their neighbors are saying, hey, I want one of those. And before you know it, there's people in the area saying, hey, can you build me one of those? And then they have to hire a person or two and fast forward another few years and you've got 3 or 4 people working there and you've got a business.
And they didn't maybe intend to start one. They're just like, I just wanted to work on cars. Now I own an auto shop. It's
exactly.
Like, damn it.
And so what you see is they're not necessarily entrepreneurs. They enjoy getting dirt under their fingers, and they enjoy working, and they're creative and they're innovative, and they've built something, but they're not looking at it, when Stephen Covey begin with the end in mind, they're not looking at it from, okay, I'm building this to exit or to hand off to, a child or somebody else. And so what we try to just, when we can, have that conversation about, hey, in the next few years, be thinking about this, and sit down with your CPA, sit down with your attorney, sit down with your banker, and say, hey, in the next 3 to 5 years, it's time for me to think about what's next, that next season of life. And so many of us want to hang on with that death grip to the season of life we're in. Well, father time doesn't stop. And as you get to a point where, either you have a health concern or your spouse is saying, hey, I'm tired of you working 80 hours a week in this business, or you get to a point where you just burn out. Before you get to one of those 3 situations, why not at least start having the conversation about what's next, about what that next season of life is, where you can still, we tell sellers all the time, we want you to have a plan so you're able to impact and choose the time of your exit. And you're able to share what you want to share when you want to share it, as opposed to waiting until circumstances dictate that you've got to exit. You have a heart attack, you're diagnosed with cancer, your spouse becomes ill, and all of a sudden you're saying, hey, I've got 6 grandkids that I don't spend any time with because I'm doing this. I got plenty of stuff, I got plenty of money. So that's where we try to help with the planning process. Once somebody gets to a point where they say, yeah, it is time to, let's evaluate this. We come in, we don't charge anything. There's no obligation to have us come in and say, hey, here's what we believe a fair market value is for your business today. We're happy to do that. That's a service we provide at no charge. And then a couple things happen at that point. Either you're full of crap, it's worth 3 times that much, or yeah, that sounds good, let's move forward, or gosh, I need it to be worth more than that. And then we can come alongside and say, hey, here are some things that we see that you may want to think about in the next couple of years if you do want to increase the value of it. And inevitably, that always it starts with one big thing. All those, running 32 family cell phones through your business, so you're not paying as much in taxes. That's all good. I mean, nobody wants to pay taxes, but before you exit, if you want to maximize your value, you need to have a couple of years of what we call clean tax returns. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you may pay a few dollars in taxes, but you're going to significantly increase the value of your business when you're showing that as income. And everything that we do is predicated on that concept. So if you're a business owner and you say, well, I don't want to show a profit because I don't want to pay any taxes on it, well, that's all well and good. But if you're going to sell that business, then somebody's got to have a bank finance that business for them. Bank doesn't care what you're taking out the side door. Bank doesn't care about your add backs, what we call add backs, which are expenses that a current owner has that a new owner may not have. There are some of those that are legitimate. Bank wants to know what you're reporting on your tax returns. And if you're not reporting enough that the new owner can get financing, well, gosh, you're kind of stepping on your own toes. So it's a beautiful process. It's a process that's different with every single deal. And we've been doing it long enough, almost 8 years now, that I won't say we've seen it all, but we've seen enough to know how to help people. And we're also the guys, we're kind of the conservative guys in our industry in the Midwest that, we don't mind telling people their baby's ugly. And that's, I'd rather have that conversation up front and then in a year and a half or 2 years get a listing than tell somebody what they want to hear and overprice a listing, and then we waste everybody's time.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you probably have conversations with people that think they have a business, but they just have a job, where it's like they think their business is worth a lot, but it's like once you're gone as the owner, this is nothing. Like,
right. You are the business.
Yes. Like you literally just have a job that people just pay you directly instead of an employer cutting you a check. So I think that's a piece of it too, where you probably, if you have those conversations, you can say, hey, if you're wanting to retire in the next 3 to 5 years or sell it or whatever, it's like you need to build SOPs. You need to remove yourself from the business.
Exactly.
You need to like systematize this whole thing. So then there's actually something of value that you could then sell.
Right. The rule of thumb it starts with to explain that concept in a lot of cases, like, hey, if you went on vacation for a month, what would happen with your business? If the business runs like you're there, you're probably on the right track. If everything comes to a halt, if you're the sales guy and you make every decision and everything runs through you, then you better figure out how to replace yourself, or in some cases hire a general manager or something along those lines before. And again, that's part of that plan of preparing for exit. Do you have repeatable processes? Is your sales process repeatable? And nobody's going to buy it if you're the business. You see that we don't do a ton of stuff in the restaurant or in that space, and there's nothing wrong with buying a job. So, if you're passionate about food and you want to work every night and every weekend and you love people and you're running a restaurant, and that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to be able to step away, you better have somebody that's running it for you.
Well, and I have so many examples in my mind and thoughts. We have so many guests on the podcast that have acquired a business or sold one. Different circumstances of life. I even think of like in my small town, I grew up in West Point, Iowa, like in Southeast Iowa, and we had our local pizza joint go up for sale, and the owner had he sold it and rebought it like 2 or 3 times because people just
right.
And he's like works 3 jobs, like one of those guys just can't get away from it. But he was selling it, and I can't remember, it was like the building, all the equipment, turnkey, everything, plus there was like a daycare attached to it. Well, the selling price was like $300,000. That was it. I'm like, well, that's it?
Right.
It's like, please, somebody take this. But it just the reality of it is like, it's like you said, it's a 7-day-a-week type job. And it's in a dinky little town in Southeast Iowa. It's like not the booming metropolis that it is,
And that's again, there's nothing wrong with buying a job for the right person. And in the restaurant space, you see a lot of times where, the owner will finance it because that's the only way you're going to get any real value back out of it. And you run the risk of, well, the guy I sold it to ran it into the ground and now I got it back. And, that's, again, unless there's real estate involved, we don't do a ton of stuff in the restaurant space for all those reasons. Home services is an incredibly hot space right now. And it's really interesting. The way things get hot and cold. A few years ago, everybody wanted to be in precision manufacturing, and you had a lot of private equity, a lot of family offices, a lot of what we call smart money. They were looking to acquire precision manufacturing. Now today, it's that home services space,
plumbers, HVAC,
right,
electricians. And
what you see the family offices or the private equity, they'll acquire a bunch of them, roll them all up into one entity, and then they have something that's big enough for them to move the needle with. So that's one of the other interesting things. Most of our businesses last year we had a $18 million deal. We're working on a $10 million deal right now. But for the most part, our businesses are between $500,000 and $2.5 million. That mom and pop, what people would think of as Main Street businesses. So we don't, in those instances, in most cases, for years, private equity or family offices or an investor group doesn't really play in that space much. They want the bigger with here's our criteria for EBITDA or here's our criteria for SDE but now you're seeing in that home services space as an example, you're seeing more of that private money, that investor money coming down into those spaces, which is kind of interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how long that if you're owning a business and it's run properly, your ROI is going to be significantly higher than what most people are getting in the market and other things. Now, there's a lot of risk associated with that, but when you got guys that know how to run a business, they like that risk and they feel like they can manage that risk and they're willing to invest in those opportunities.
Do you feel like companies selling to a PE firm is a good or bad decision in general?
I hate it.
Okay.
I absolutely hate it.
Tell me why.
I'm an unapologetic capitalist. Okay, I'm about making money, but
except when you're running a horse farm,
right?
Unless you're running the ranch.
Well, I got to make money to be able to do that. But,
yes.
But not. What is it? How does it benefit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? That's I've got a friend that worked for companies that were acquired and sold by private equity, and he cashed out. He did great. He put millions in the bank. And he's one of my oldest friends. We've been friends since 1984. And I tell him, like, dude, you sold out. You sold your soul to the man so that you can go live on Rehoboth Beach in Delaware and chill. You know, at the end of the day, with our sellers in a lot of cases, and somebody that just has the beliefs and value system that we do, I want to make sure that community retains those jobs. I want to make sure that there are people that are investing in that community. You know, some private equity in this day and age, they have that. They'll tell you anyway. They have a buy and hold. Hey, we're not gonna buy it and aggregate it and sell it off or whack off this division or that division and get rid of it, or close that facility altogether and consolidate everything over here. Those kinds of, you know, one of the deals we're working on right now, that's a deal. Hey, we buy and hold. Well, here's the last 20 acquisitions we've made. And so in some of those instances, you can say, okay, that makes sense for the community. It makes sense for the seller. But with our folks, our sellers care about their employees. Our sellers care about the service that's provided to their clients. Our sellers care about their role in their community. And so we try to be sensitive to the fact, it doesn't mean the seller can't choose to sell to whoever they want to, but we want to make sure that we're educating all parties involved. Okay, here's really what is likely. And if you do value your employees, you may want to take some steps to ensure that they're taken care of in this process. You want to make some, do some things that make sure your customers are taken care of in this process. And for us, a lot of times, we don't get to choose who buys and sells, but we can educate every step of the way and try to make sure that everybody's aware of those types of things.
In your work, how do you find a company's value? Because I was on an entrepreneurship TV show last year, and we had an entire 12-hour day about valuation, how to find the valuation of your company. It's so arbitrary and so abstract, and so there's no clear formula. How do you guys typically go about finding valuation for a company? In your hard brass tacks, this is the act, we're not blowing wind up your skirt. This is what it's actually worth type of approach.
To be honest with you, Ryan, the people that make it complicated are doing it for a reason. Same reason that, you and I can't read a typical contract because the lawyers have got in and there's all kinds of language in there that makes it so you have to use an attorney. At the end of the day, it comes down to what's the seller discretionary earnings on smaller, typically on businesses $1 million or lower. What's SDE? What's the actual net benefit to the owner? And that can involve some add backs. It can involve some other things. But there are generally accepted accounting principles that every bank uses. If you go, your local bank isn't evaluating whether that business cash flows any different than any other bank. They're just not. We might, we might want people to believe it's some magic secret formula. But what's seller discretionary earnings? And on businesses of $1 million and up, it's what's EBITDA? Mm-hmm. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And frankly, there's complexity in looking through the financials at times, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. And then you assign a multiple of SDE or a multiple of EBITDA. And multiples, that's where you can argue, hey, is this are we 3.5 times EBITDA, or are we 6 times EBITDA? And that's where some of the processes and practices that we talked about, is it a repeatable sales process? Is the business run itself? Some of those things are, but the biggest thing that's going to impact the multiple is cash flow. That's the reality of it. So if you've got a business who's like we talk about a mom and pop, a Main Street business, and they're putting $200,000 a year, and that's their legitimate seller discretionary earnings, you're not going to see a 6 or 7 multiple on that. You're going to see a 2.5, maybe a 3 multiple on that. So, while every business has this, the more you can make it, you can fluff it up and make it sound like what you're doing is alchemy, the more you can charge for it. I tell people all the time, telling you what your business is worth, we have to value it in a way that when the seller goes to the bank, they have credibility. And we just because we want to put a bigger number on it, so we make a bigger commission, just doesn't hold water. So, yeah, I don't view it as overly complex. We have a couple spreadsheets that we'll use to get us to a point where we can calculate SDE, and then we have some online platforms that we'll use for some of that are a little bit more complex. But at the end of the day, when you have the federal tax returns in hand, the numbers are all there.
Sure.
And you can play games with them, but yeah, I'd like to say it's more complex than that. It's really not. It's not if you're in our world anyway.
Yeah, I know. Just from what we've heard, what I've heard, kind of through the grapevine and everything, was like a 3x multiple of either, and depends who you talk to, but it's like revenue or profit. But I think it really depends on the industry too, because some of the places you might have like an amazing customer list or the customer lifetime values a repeat customer if it's like a
right.
gym or something they're on membership, or it's an auto dealer that has like people that have fleets that buy frequently. Like, again, it's so nuanced on the business.
You have customer concentration issues and other things that impact that, but and there's lots of resources out there that give us rules of thumb. We've been doing this. The business has been around for 12, 14 years in Iowa, operating. We've sold businesses around the country, but primarily here. We have a pretty good idea of what the market is, and so when there is discretion, at the same time, I tell my guys every Tuesday when we have our weekly staff meetings, hey, my crystal ball sucks. So, I'm not opposed to new ideas or new things. And as we, again, last year and this year, as we've played in that M&A space with larger deals, yeah, there are some things there. You start seeing some larger multiples. You start seeing some more aggressive pricing on that. So, it all comes down to what's the cash flow? What, if any, legitimate add backs are there in some of these mom and pop businesses? A great example, I have my life insurance policy is paid for by the business. New owner may not have that. Just one legitimate example. So there are some of those things that are legitimate, and a bank or somebody's going to accept that as being, hey, that's not necessarily an expense a new owner is going to have. So we can credit that back. But beyond that, it's more straightforward than people would think. What we really ask people to do is have that plan, and if it's going to take you a couple of years to work through that and to give and take on the valuation or give and take on what you're reporting, let's do that and let's have that conversation up front.
No, I love that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good pieces there, and we can kind of come back to it. I think now's a good time we can do our lightning round, so we can see what we're doing for this. How are you feeling about this lightning round here, Al?
I'm, as you might tell, I'm pretty transparent.
Okay. Well, hey, maybe you'll knock all these out. Maybe you'll get a perfect score here. You mentioned you did undergrad at William Penn, played basketball. Ironically, I
played basketball at Iowa. And then because I had back surgery, I didn't get to finish in my 4-year window, so I had to finish later as an adult at William Penn.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say my father-in-law played basketball at William Penn, and he's 6'8", so he's one inch shorter than you. But I thought that was kind of a funny connection point.
That is.
What's your most memorable time or most memorable memory from playing in Europe?
A riot.
There was a riot?
We had a very controversial, and you see some of the stuff in the soccer games. You see the crowds freaking out, I was my first year. We were playing in a little town in the French Alps, is where we lived, and we had a game where everybody knew that one of the referees had a brother playing for another team in the league that was in contention for the same playoff spot we were, and that referee made some controversial calls throughout the game, and our fans rushed the floor. And let's just say he didn't escape unscathed.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was. So that was pretty entertaining. And you only asked me for one. But the other thing, I played that year with a guy named Jeff Wilkins, who had been with the Utah Jazz. And Jeff was this mountain of a man, just huge, strong. I wouldn't have even messed with him. And when Jeff didn't get a call that he thought he should in practice, he would just take the ball under his arm, go up and sit down in the stands until the coach changed the call. Like, okay, that's one way to do it.
Just throw a temper tantrum, and no one can mess with a big old baby like that. So that's awesome. Random questions now. Can you name 6 illegal drugs?
Methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, although we could argue that's not really illegal anymore. Acid, speed.
Hey, you got it all. Good job. Good job. Completely random ones. I'm just throwing you off your game here. Another random question. Where is the headquarters of the CIA?
Langley.
You got it right.
In Virginia.
In Virginia, yep. I think it's like a suburb of D.C., right? Just pretty close.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
You're right. I've seen pictures of it from the outside on Google. Can you name the 7 dwarves from Sleeping Beauty?
Let's see. Grumpy, sleepy, dopey, happy, bashful, Doc, sneezy. Oh boy.
I think that's all of them, I believe. I haven't written down. I'm bouncing around.
I joke around.
Doc's the one I always forget. He's the one that's not an E at the end.
I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I joke around with Kelly. Kelly's a barrel racer and very dramatic and the love of my life, and I would kill or die for her. So let's start by putting that on the table. I'm like, okay, which personality am I getting today? And I usually run through the 7 dwarfs. Okay, are you grumpy? Are you bashful? Are you sneezy? That's how I remember most of them.
Yeah, I always forget Doc because he's the only one that's got a different name than everyone else. So you passed the gauntlet. Congratulations.
Oh boy.
You're through. You aced it. So that's great.
My kids will tell you I have lots of useless information rattling around up here.
Sure. I love it. We are kind of jumping back into the M&A stuff. I think this is super interesting because if there's a lot of people that are listening that are small business owners, I think a lot of them will aspire to, how do I get my business to become the highest multiple to get the most for an exit, and how do I prepare myself for an exit? If they're a younger entrepreneur, what advice would you have for someone to start taking the steps to get a higher multiple and or sell their business for the most money that they possibly can when it's that time?
Well, I think it goes back to what I touched on earlier and repeated often is, have a plan, and that is understand what it takes to scale. In some cases, understand what it takes to have those SOPs, understand what you need to do to make sure that business can run and function without you. And that can involve, in most cases, having the right people around you. Very rarely do you run into somebody that has all the expertise, all the skill set, and can pull it all together, in a vacuum. So that's where, again, have the courage or the humility to say, hey, I may need a consultant. I may need to bring somebody in that is objective, that can look at this from the outside. And then I tell people all the time, but don't be an asshole. What's an asshole? An asshole is where you hire somebody or ask somebody for their input and advice, and then you don't take it. If you're going to ask somebody for help, especially if you're paying them, you maybe should listen to what they're telling you. So your team, if you don't have, we hear from people all the time, well, my CPA isn't much help. Well, then get a different CPA. There's a lot of, in this day and age with technology, what it is, you have access to people all over the planet, if you choose to, that you can, in a cost-effective way, can start saying, okay, here's my plan. In the next 5 to 7 years, it's time to exit. And there are plenty of people out there that will take a look, whether it's people that do what we do or others that will walk alongside you and, okay, here's some things that you need to think about. And you're going to need to hire these 3 positions to get ready for exit. Well, I don't want to pay anybody. Well, again, there's certain costs of doing business that, you may increase your payroll, but if you're increasing your multiple 4 or 5 times, to me, that's an investment. Mm-hmm. That's not just going on the expense side of the ledger. That's an investment in what you're doing. So the biggest thing is, in every instance, we're going to walk in and say, okay, 70% of your business is with this one customer. Okay, you've got a significant customer concentration issue. So how do you diversify? How do you expand your sales team or your sales focus to keep that customer and keep them happy, but grow over here. And what does that look like? In some cases, we see people that need to think about a small acquisition to grow their business to impact that multiple. If they've got a weakness, if they've got a hole in their business that you can either fill it internally by creating the team and adapting your focus to do that, or is there somebody you can acquire that it's turnkey and you've just filled that hole in your array of services or in your revenue model through one piece. So the biggest thing that we see people that are successful doing is that what's the plan, and making sure that you've got smart people that are going along with you, walking alongside you, saying, is it the right plan? Does it make sense? And then what are the tactical steps you're going to need to do and in what time frame to execute that plan?
Well, and I think just again, like you said, planning the end begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. That's perfect. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't think that, because I used to work for a production company before I started mine, and I asked the owners quarterly, very regularly, what are we doing with the business? Because they're all older retirement age guys, and they didn't have a succession plan. It's like 4 owners, no clue. And I'm like, I don't want to be here when this all goes up in flames, because like if you don't know, I don't feel like, like you said, we could sell to a PE firm. They could just close it down. Like, are all the employees just going to have to like go start spinning an arrow with a chicken costume on in the corner? It's like, what are we going to have to do? It's kind of having a plan, and I think communicating the plan even to your employees helps, so then they kind of know what's going on. Well, and
you have key employees that, and maybe that's part of the conversation. Hey, we're, and larger companies we see will create an ESOP, or, where the initial owners, it becomes employee owned, and they're basically cashed out even though they're still involved running it, and they're beginning to hand off some of those key responsibilities and other things. For some people, maybe that key employee is going to transition into ownership. I have a good friend that owns a local business here in Des Moines, and he went to work for the guy, worked for him for 10 years, and the guy was ready to retire, and they had talked about it. They had put a plan together, and it was almost seamless transition to that key employee. So, there's no right or wrong. I guess I would qualify that. To me, the wrong approach in this case is to not have a plan, to not be self-aware enough to say, hey, in the next several years, I need to think about exiting. If you're not in a position to do that, then there's probably nothing any of us are going to do to prepare you for it or help you with it. And you're going to wait until you have that heart attack, until you're diagnosed with something, or until your spouse says either you knock this off or I'm leaving. So that's it all comes back to, and again, I wish it was more complex. What's your plan? And do you have the right people on your team to help you execute that plan?
I love it. We've talked about a lot of the businesses along the way, different life experiences. Have there been any, I'm sure there have been, any experiences that you've had that have really tested you along your career path? Maybe like barriers in or doors getting slammed in your face type of experiences that have kind of shaped you to be the person you are today?
I think adversity is always a part of life. I mean, that's that you get knocked down 6 times, you get up 7. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I've been fortunate in that I've had quite a number of jobs over my lifetime. My 30-year-old daughter, at one point when she was a teenager, and I shared, hey, sweetheart, I got this new opportunity. And she said, Dad, aren't you worried? Because you don't keep a job very long. And we laughed about them. Well, it's a big step forward. But I've had a lot of opportunities that have presented themselves. And I've had some where they just didn't work out for whatever reason. And some things, what I've found is when those doors have been slammed on me, typically I took a position for the money, or I took a position for reasons other than I'm passionate about this. I understand this. I believe this is what I'm called to do. When you start getting outside of that, when you see people that are unhappy in their jobs, or that their jobs don't work out for them, a lot of times it's going back to what was the why. And if your why isn't solid on why you're doing, Simon Sinek's a genius in my mind. If you don't have the why of what you're doing figured out, you may want to think about something else. It doesn't mean we all haven't taken jobs just to put food on the table. I think everybody's done that, and there's a time and place to do that. But don't be surprised then when that doesn't work out.
Absolutely. Well, I think even just finding these moments in life where we can kind of reflect and say, this sucked in the moment, but it's teaching me a lesson for something down the road, or it's preparing me for the next step.
Well, great example. Again, what we're talking about in our world is faith focused. But when we set out to build the ranch, cash flow was an issue. And there was plenty of months, Ryan, where we're like, okay, I got to pay rent, the office in West Des Moines. We've got our place where we live in Waukee. We've got a mortgage already and a construction loan on the ranch. We can't afford to do all three. And that's stressful. That's any entrepreneur, any small business owner that's, you figure out how you're going to make payroll. You're in that same boat. And, if the money isn't coming in, how are you going to write the check? The stress and the angst. And Kelly and I put ourselves in that position by taking on a responsibility and building the ranch and trying to serve that piece of the community. And we knew there was going to be a significant financial burden. We trusted that God would provide, but that didn't make it any less stressful. That doesn't mean we weren't just going to bed, curling up and going to sleep every night. There was a lot of stress, a lot of sleepless nights. And through that process, what we learned is guess what our track record is for getting through all that stuff? It's 100%. We're still here.
Still standing, yeah.
We're still here. And it comes back to when you wake up and you're grounded in the why you're doing it. That really solves a lot of that anxiety, and it solves a lot of, at least it did for us. Doesn't mean you're not struggling, you're not wrestling, but when you overcome that, the time that you are able to reflect back when you're on the other side of those obstacles or those challenges, there's a depth and a weight that comes with conquering those circumstances that just prepares you for what's next. And, again, one of our core beliefs is we didn't sign up for comfortable. So if that's your approach, when the discomfort comes, doesn't mean it's fun, doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean you want to be at 60 years old, you want to be worried about how you're going to pay your rent. But you'll figure it out. You know that God will provide. You'll know that the opportunities will come so that you can, and you move forward. And then you look back the next time and it's maybe a little less anxious.
You mentioned the start with why, the Simon Sinek approach to it is kind of shaped a little bit of your life. What is your why in terms of business and life? What is the real why that you're trying to get to through your different business experience here?
Well, the why is to figure out where God's at work and join Him there. In our world, it's kind of a unique set of horses, Jesus, kids. What? How? And again, 10 years ago, I would have never imagined that this is what we're doing. But this is what God's equipped us and called us and invited us into. So for us, again, it all goes back to that faith journey and what we believe we're called to do, where we're working with God. So that's the why. And that also segues into what we talked about earlier, that building a bigger table philosophy. It segues into, if we're creating the kind of environment that draws our family in and they want to be a part of that and they want to spend time and do all those things, that's part and parcel to those beliefs and values. And then when we work with business owners, we don't take listings just for the commission check. Obviously, that's a necessary piece to the puzzle, but how do we serve people? How do we walk alongside them? And all that goes back to, our desire and our mission to honor and glorify God with how we're interacting with humans. Now, people are watching, oh, that's a bunch of crap. This guy can't. No, we don't get it right all the time. We swing and miss plenty. I get pissed off. We're working cattle the other night. We have roping steers, and there was some colorful language, and we, at the same time, that bonds us with the boys working through things. So we're not perfect. We don't claim to be perfect, but at the end of the day, if we wake up tomorrow and we're saying, how do we positively impact the world and our community and do it in a way that honor, then the details will work itself out.
I love that. I know we really hit on the parenting side early, and I'm really happy we got to do that. Bringing it back to that, what advice did you have for other young parents out there that are trying to raise good people that are going to go out in the world and make an impact and not become the skid mark on the underpants of society, if you will?
Kind of and I'm, at this season of life, even though I have relatively young kids and a 13-year-old, I also have that 30-year-old. So I've seen a little bit, and I tell my boys, like, my job isn't to tell you how to live. My job isn't to make all your choices for you. My job is to expose you to things that prepares you for life, and also to share the truth, what I believe the truth, but you guys get to decide, whether it's from a faith standpoint or a career standpoint, or, my son Luke, my 17-year-old, talking through with him in junior high, hey, any idea what you think you want to do? Yeah, I think being an architect or an engineer is pretty cool. Okay, my job as the dad then is to make sure you understand what is going to be involved in that. So that involved, okay, first and foremost, as you're going into ninth grade and they're going to start actually giving you letter grades, a B isn't an option for you. Like, as your dad, I don't mind if you get a B every once in a while. My job is to say, okay, I believe God's gifted you and made you intelligent, so you need to use that. But if you want to be an engineer, getting a B isn't an option. So that's your call. I'm good either way. We love you unconditionally, but so trying to help them make informed choices. The same thing with, as the boys have gone through with basketball or football. Never once would I blame an official if a team loses. You guys get to impact that. If you put yourself in a position, if you're on a team that put yourself in a position where an official's call is going to take a game from you, then you should have done more to make sure that official's call wasn't going to be the deciding factor. I mean, those are life lessons. So to me, it's how do we educate our kids? How do we make sure they're making informed choices, not telling them what to do. I say, hey, if you guys want to go to college, we'll do everything we can to help you. Doesn't mean we're going to pay for everything. If you guys want to learn a trade, again, we'll do everything we can to help you. I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. Now, if you want to just think about this, if you want to learn a trade and someday you want to have your own company, that college thing might help you run your company. So, my job is to help them discover the gifts that God's given them and how they can maximize those gifts. It's not you need to vote this way, or you need to believe that, or you need to. No, it's just to say, hey, the cool thing is you get to figure it out. My job is to tell you maybe some possible consequences of these choices or opportunities, and that's not always easy to do because none of us want to see our kids struggle. But you know what? That's growth. That there's growth in that struggle, so it's one of the great joys and privileges of my life is to be a dad and be old enough and hopefully self-aware enough to be able to guide my sons now and my daughter in her season of life through some of these things, and not do it in a way that alienates them, not do it in a way that enables them. But try to thread that needle and find that happy medium.
I love it. I think there's a lot of great things people can take away just from everything we talked about today. If people are wanting to connect with you, where's a good place to do it, to learn maybe about the equine stuff, but also even the M&A stuff, if you guys are wanting to share some stuff about that?
Well, you can, the business brokers, you can Google that in Iowa. It's tbbinc.com. That's our website, and you can schedule an appointment with me right there on the website. And Godspeed Equine, again, Google that, take a look at our website, Facebook page, all the stuff. And we're happy we love showing people around. We have people all the time that, hey, can we just come out and you guys show us around the ranch? So yeah, that part of it on the business side, I have probably 2 to 3 appointments a day that come through the website. People, maybe it's questions, maybe they're acquiring things, maybe they're looking to sell, curious what their business is worth. So yeah, we love interacting. We love trying to serve and help, and happy to take any calls.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I think, like I said, I think a lot of people can take some big life lessons away, some business lessons away, and help improve their life. So appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me on. Perfect.
Well, if you've made it this far on the show, you guys know what to do. Give us a like, give us a subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, and follow us on social media for clips from all 84 episodes that we've done. My name is Ryan Snaadt, Ryan Snaadt, and I'm out. Peace. Thank you so much for watching yet another episode of the Rhymes with the Odd podcast. We really do appreciate your support. If you could give us a 5-star review on Apple iTunes, that makes a world of difference, guys. Also, if you're tuning in on YouTube or Spotify, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and check us out on social media. Also, if you'd like to inquire more about our services here at Snod Media Group, or learn about doing your own podcast for your own business, you can find us at snodmedia.com. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.